I know you've talked quite a bit about the U.S. position here on North Korea, and hearing Nikki Haley say today that we've pretty much exhausted all options and we've kicked the can down the road long enough for a quarter of a century. What does the U.S. need to do now, or what can the U.S. do now? What are the other options?
Well, I think we've run our string on Bluster and on name calling. I don't see that that's going to go much farther. And frankly, that's not working. It may even be counterproductive because Kim loves it. It's great for his home consumption in his country, North Korea. It makes the United States the big bugaboo. The question is, what's the solution here? I think to a large degree, we have to start as a country, the United States, think a lot more about working with China. I think the road to a solution to Kim Jong-Un's denuclearizing to a degree, or maybe freezing, is a road through China. China is very transactional. They're very cool. They've been looking at all this, and I'll bet dollars to donuts, given my experience over there and how they operate, that they're looking for an opportunity here. China could very well save our bacon. China could very well.
How?
China could very well say, okay, this has gone pretty far, and here's an opportunity for us, China, to help the United States. How, you ask? One is start to put a lot more pressure on Kim. That is, not let him get any oil, stop the oil exports into North Korea. There are a lot of things China can do to squeeze. So far, China has been willing to deal with the status quo. But we're getting to the point where I think China is starting to look to see that there are opportunities for China here, too. And I think we should work with that the best we can.
But, Max, we heard from the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, saying, look, they're looking at these options of, putting more sanctions on Chinese banks. Right. I mean, are we hitting closer to a breaking point in the U.S. and China relationship right now? It seems like the U.S. is, the message is it's either us or them.
Oh, it's true. Our messaging is very unclear. President Trump's blows hot and cold with respect to China, and that's not helping. And in addition, we're talking publicly too much to China. Usually, in major problems like this, the solutions are found privately. Not public diplomacy, but private diplomacy. And unfortunately, we Americans, we've been too public. Second, our bench is thin. The State Department personnel have not yet been appointed by the president to fill these top jobs. Our knowledge of China, I think, is very limited. It is what it is, though. We're going to have to really work at it to develop an accommodation, I think, with China. China's going to want to also know what the end game is. China's going to want to say, okay, we'll squeeze Kim more. But in addition, we, China, want to know what's going to be the solution in the peninsula.
Right.
China, and there are a lot of factors like that, but we have to start talking to China and exploring these different options with China.
Max, I know a lot of this is going to be hammered out, eye to eye between President Trump and President Xi. But I'm kind of curious. I want to take your position as the former ambassador to China and give me a sense of what you think the current ambassador, Terry Branstad, what role he might play. I mean, so much was made about, his 3-decade-long relationship with President Xi. Is there any role for him to play in this?
I think there's a great role for him to play. There's a great role for all of us to play. That is, the entire administration, beginning with Trump and Secretary Tillerson and clearly the President's national security team. We have to engage China much, much more than we have in the past. In past years, when we would talk to China about North Korea, when I was there, they were drive-bys. It was check in the box. Our requests of China were embarrassingly superficial, in my judgment. We've got to get past that. Now the chicken's coming home to roost. The rubber's meeting the road, and we got to get real. The bluster is not working, so let's just sit down, do the hard work, which is behind-the-scenes negotiation and developing contacts and with lots of with appropriate folks in China, so we can start finding some solutions.
Max, just taking a look at the events that happened on Sunday with this nuclear test, the 6th one we've seen from Pyongyang, the strongest yet we have seen. What was the motive behind this, and what was the message being sent? Was it sent to the U.S. or was it sent to China?
I think it's sent to both. I think Kim, he's kind of the catbird seat. You know, he knows that he can keep shooting off missiles and conducting tests, and he knows that the United States response is bluster. The United States response is, oh, we're going to blow you off the map. But he knows also that's highly unlikely. He knows it's highly unlikely the United States is going to conduct a strong military option here because the consequences are so dire. He is trying to build himself up as strong a point as he can possibly get at, so that when he does reach a negotiation here, he's in a better position, in a stronger position.
Max,
very clever, very clever.
Certainly seems that way. Max, you need some cleverness, though, here in Washington to try to get through tax reform. I want to just take a moment, just really quickly on the domestic front. We've got Congress reconvening now. Tax reform, top of the agenda. How do you think Trump is going to play this? What has he learned from trying to get Obamacare through, or not through, that he's going to be able to apply to try to get tax reform through by the end of the year?
Well, this is a bit trite, but frankly, I think it all comes down to the degree to which he works on a bipartisan basis. Unfortunately, he approached health care reform totally on a partisan basis, and that tends not to work in Washington. If he takes the same approach on tax reform, I think the result's going to be similar. Then he's got infrastructure, he has immigration. When the political party, when the president and the political party and the majority tries to ram something down the throat of the minority, it tends not to work.
So it's not going to go through?
Because the country gets very polarized.
Okay, so you don't think it's going to go through?
I think it's going to be something minor, be a modest tax cut in the end, not tax reform.